God's blessings to you as we continue our Seasons of Prayer series. I am Randi Hom, the volunteer youth minister for the Hamilton Catholic Pastoral Region, and today I'm going to share with you about what prayer looked like when I was going through infertility. When I was 9 years old, I started my cycle. That's actually very early age. And by age 15, I realized that there was something very wrong, but I didn't really know what to do about it. And I had seen about 3 doctors at that time, and I had no answers. And I began to pray at that point because I really didn't know what I was praying for. I didn't really know what I was praying for. And it was kind of casual or sporadic because I did not know what I was supposed to be asking God for. And I didn't know what to do. And when you're 15, you don't really know what to do. When I was in high school, though, I started using the pill to regulate my cycle, and it was the only thing that worked at the time, and that was the only option available to me. Although, I was really beginning to embrace my Catholic faith at that point, and it wasn't really consciously a good option, so that was just what I had to deal with. When I was in college, I began to pray for an answer. To give a little bit more detail, basically when I would have my cycle, I was bleeding for 29 days out of a 30-day month, so it's not really what you would expect, but that was happening all the time. And I began to pray for an answer. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know the reason why, and I wanted a solution. I was pretty direct with God about that. And towards my later years of college, I started to use the pill again, just for a couple years, trying to regulate my cycle. But it was in my 3rd year of college that I discovered naprotechnology, or the Creighton method, and I was just so excited because it seemed like it was the answer to all my problems. So I quit using the pill, and I had met my husband Ben shortly after that, and we started learning how to chart and learn about that method. And it was difficult for us, being engaged and being 5 hours away from each other, and but it was also difficult once I got home to find a new practitioner that was near where I lived. Once I got home, though, and got a job and all that, my husband Ben and I got married. It was April 12th, 2008. We got married, and we started trying to get pregnant right away. A lot of people told us that we shouldn't, that we should enjoy our time, and we did not want to. We started trying right away because I knew in my heart that we were going to have a difficult time getting pregnant, and so we dove in. I prayed every day, kind of in desperation, to God, asking repeatedly, can you please just help me get pregnant? I spent time at Mass praying, in Eucharistic adoration praying, at home at night, all the time praying. And each cycle brought a no. And I was pretty depressed. This was this went on for like 3 to 4 years. And I was really depressed. My Creighton practitioner that I was seeing kept on telling me about all these women that she was able to help get pregnant, and I really didn't want to hear that. I was asking her to stop telling me about these women, and she just would not stop, and so I fired her. And I fired my doctor that I was seeing at that time, who was a NAPRO doctor, basically because he wouldn't do blood work that I really desperately needed to know what was working and what was not. And I just kind of walked away from that situation. But what happened at that point is that I stepped away from actively trying to get pregnant. And so I wasn't going to the gynecologist for that purpose. And I did it basically for my mental health, because trying to get pregnant and going through infertility is a major, it's just a major cross that we have as women. And we still desired to have a baby. Don't get me wrong, we still desired to have a baby, but it was clear to me that NAPRO technology was not the answer to my problem. And for the next 2 years, or a few years actually, we saw 2 more doctors. One was like the top gynecologist in Cincinnati, and they could not help me. Actually, the one refused to help me after I refused to do in vitro, because I was really trying to hold on to my Catholic identity at that point. And during this time, I was praying for an answer, or for a baby. I thought the baby was the answer. But I was also praying, why can't I get pregnant? Because I knew that there was something underneath that no one was finding. So my question to God was, why can't I get pregnant? And I prayed. I went to Mass, I prayed that, I went to adoration, I prayed that prayer. It was like the only prayer that I prayed for a long time. We received, my husband and I, we received special blessings from different deacons and priests that we knew, in hopes that God would find favor with us and allow us to get pregnant. It felt like the church didn't look at us with favor or love, because we didn't have any children, and that was what good Catholic people did, is they had kids, and we did not have children. And we endured a lot of rude questions and probing into our lives from lots of people, family, friends, parishioners. And at this time, I was working as a full-time youth minister. And we also had parishioners, people who we thought were friends, spread rumors about us at our parish and tell people that we were using contraception and that we did not want children, which was a complete lie. And I was heartbroken about this. Like, how could people turn on me like that? And I knew that God had some kind of plan, but I just didn't know what. I dove into my relationship with God and to my work as a youth minister even the more, because I was trying to drown out the voices of people and all their comments and whatnot, and also the pain. Infertility is super painful. It's mentally, spiritually painful. But it was also during this time that I started learning how to stand up for myself and how to articulate that even though I did not have children, that God had a plan, and that I'm not just good for having children. I have a purpose. So this brings us up to 2013. It was between 2013 and 2014 that I stopped seeing the gynecologist altogether. I didn't have any answers from them, and I had kind of had enough. In 2015, I began to not have a period anymore. But since I had had them all the time, I wasn't worried. I was actually feeling like freedom for the very first time. And I didn't really care. But my mom, who was a nurse, she was concerned and begged me to go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor, and I had to find a new doctor because my insurance had changed, because I had switched jobs. And I made an appointment, and I went in. It was April of 2016. It was a Monday morning. And I really didn't know what to expect, except the same kind of stuff that I had encountered before, which was a whole bunch of no answers and no help. Exactly a week later, I was able to get an appointment with a specialist that they had referred me to, and exactly a week later, right down to the appointment time, I was in her office. So it was, again, another Monday morning in April, and she seemed very hopeful and had a lot of smiles for me and said that she could help me. But those smiles quickly faded into worried looks at me, and she scheduled me for a biopsy 2 days later. And I was worried at this point. I, again, did not know what to pray for. But during the biopsy, it became clear that I needed to be scheduled for a D&C. When I was in the hospital a week later, everything was moving at a very quick pace. So, safe to say I was scared, and I was praying that everything was going to be okay. I was really hoping that nothing was going to be wrong. But after my D&C and I was in recovery, my mom and my husband, Ben, talked to the doctor, and she basically laid it out that it didn't look like I was going to ever be able to have children. And they waited to tell me. And when they did, it was like I was numb. And it felt kind of like a blur, because everything else kept on going. A week later from this, my doctor referred me to another specialist, and I thought I was just going in for them to kind of go over everything after my D&C. And when I got there, I was down at UC in Cincinnati. It became clear to me that this wasn't your regular specialist. She had referred me to an oncologist. And I sat there in the waiting room with cancer patients all around me, and it felt like time stood still. And I bargained with God, and I prayed that I would make it. I really didn't know what to expect. And when I was in the office, they told me that I had precancer in my uterus, and I was told that I had two options, and that was, number one, to take some kind of experimental drugs to see if that would hold the cancer off so I could try to get pregnant, or 2 for me to have a hysterectomy. And I was stunned. I was 32, and I just kind of, in my stunned state, I just kind of floated there with God in that room. We had these big windows in that room, and I just kind of floated there. I just didn't really know what to think or what to ask God for. I didn't have the words. I still don't have the words for that time. But God knew my heart. That's all I can say. So after that appointment, within, a day or 2, I got an appointment with the doctor that had referred me, and she confirmed to me that there were no other options. Even taking the experimental drugs that they wanted me to try to hold off the cancer wasn't going to work, because my only option was in vitro, and she did not think in vitro would work for me. So it was like all those doors closed, and that I knew what my choice was going to be. And I left knowing that I was going to call the oncologist's office and tell them that I was scheduling my hysterectomy, which they already had on the books. I just had to tell them yes. And afterwards, my husband and I, we went to McDonald's, which is not really where you want to be after something like that. But I remember us holding hands and me crying. And I asked God in my heart, how can you turn this around now? I was so upset because I thought things were going to be different. I thought God was going to answer my prayer differently. And I asked him, I said, how can you turn this around now? I had 2 weeks before my hysterectomy. And in those 2 weeks, I was working, but I was spending a lot of time in prayer, or trying to. I was kind of, I was stressed out a little bit. And, but I had the biggest epiphany that I've ever had in my life. And I realized that I had been praying for 17 years for an answer, for God to show me why that there was this thing wrong with me, what was wrong with me, and why I couldn't get pregnant. And I knew I had my answer. After 17 years, I had my answer. I knew why I couldn't get pregnant. And I knew what was wrong. And there was overwhelming and immediate peace. And I knew at that moment that I could enter in. I know this sounds strange, but I could enter into this with joy, almost, because I realized that even though my answer may not have been what I really wanted to, what I had prayed for, that God definitely did have a plan, and that those prayers had basically saved my life, because God's solution was to find the precancer months before it was full-blown cancer. They told me that it was really just a difference of months. And God put all those pieces in place, and He saved my life. And that's why I can be here. That's why I can be talking to you. And that they were able to get all the cancer. I actually didn't have to go through chemo even. And it was just, I still have so much peace about it because I know that God answered my prayer. And actually, God answered a secondary prayer. This is kind of, maybe you would consider it vain, but I prayed for years that I would also have curly hair like my younger sister, and God granted that too, because my hair used to not be this curly. But God had such a great plan, a plan better than one I could have thought of myself. So, all I can say is that you should remember the words of St. Alphonsus. The one who prays will be saved.